Hey everyone. Today I'm joined by Alyse Levine, one of the country's leading college counseling experts and the founder and CEO of Premium Prep. Alyse has spent years on both sides of the admissions process, from working in selective university admissions to guiding students at top independent schools. And she's built a team that helps families approach college admissions with strategy and confidence. In today's episode, we're talking about the new rules of college admissions, how AI is changing the game, why your choice of major might matter more than you think, and how students can craft applications that sound authentic and really stand out. So let's jump on in. Right, Alyse, well, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell us, first, all of our listeners, where are you originally from?
Sure, absolutely. I'm originally from New York. I grew up in Westchester County. I went to a high school called Edgemont High School. Proud alum. It's right between sort of Scarsdale, Ardsley, and Yonkers. It's a
Okay.
very tiny town.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, great. So, can you
Yeah.
tell us what kind of drew you to the world of college counseling? How did that come about for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I recently was reminded of this story that I had forgotten about. They were doing a
Hmm.
college night at my high school, and my counselor asked me if I would be the guinea pig for a mock interview. And I said, sure. And the interviewer, who was from a college, I don't remember which one,
Hmm.
asked, what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I said I wanted to be a guidance counselor, which is kind of funny. So I don't know if I was being playful or serious, but obviously, I knew I was destined to do this work. I was a tour guide in college, loved
Okay.
being involved in the admissions process, and then was hired at my alma mater to be an admissions counselor when I graduated. So that
Mhm.
was really where my career launched. And then I moved to the high school side
Mhm.
and worked at two different high schools, the Dwight
Yeah.
Englewood School in New Jersey and the Dalton School in Manhattan.
Okay.
And then we relocated to North Carolina, and that's really where I built out the private practice that I run now.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a really interesting evolution. It's so neat and funny to think, maybe that whether that came from just out of nowhere or in that moment you realized
Right?
that
I
this is
know.
the right fit. It's funny how that
Exactly.
happens. So I would, love to pick your brain a little bit. I mean, obviously you've been in this world for quite some time, and now you've built this company, and your goal here is to partner with families who are walking through an exciting but usually overwhelming and sometimes scary
Yes.
process. So I guess thinking back on all of your time in these various capacities, and then now moving into owning this company and but still working as a counselor, how have you seen the admissions landscape change over these last couple years?
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot, in particular in the last, I'd say, 5 to 8 years. We've
Hmm.
seen the most dramatic change. So it's a really apropos question. I'd say the biggest trend in the last few years in terms of what our students are looking for
Hmm.
is going for bigger schools, public
Right.
schools, a lot of interest in the South,
Mm.
the southern part of the country. I think something about the culture, that
Hmm.
there's a lot of school spirit in a lot of these
Hmm.
schools, a lot of fun. It's kind of that quintessential college experience that
Right.
many students envision, even if they are not big football fans.
Hmm.
They just love the idea of being a part of that kind of vibe and atmosphere and fun. So that's been one of the biggest changes I've seen in the types of colleges many
Okay.
students are looking for. Obviously, not all.
Hmm.
I'd say from the admission side, the trend that I have seen that has been most dramatic is when I first started, there was a lot of emphasis on academics, how smart you were, and
Hmm.
your leadership, your activities. And
Right.
it was kind of those two areas. And now it's morphed, not that those things aren't important anymore,
Hmm.
but there's a third dimension. And that third dimension is that character piece. Like, what kind of
Right.
person are you? Are you a good person? Do you care about issues beyond yourself?
Hmm.
So not just the who and the what, but the why
Hmm.
has
Yeah.
become a much bigger part of the process. And I think that's where some of the softer factors in the application can play
Hmm.
a really significant and often game changing role
Right.
in the process. I'd say another big shift, frankly, and this is, I think, the one that gives people a lot of anxiety, is that the competition has really gotten more fierce at the schools that many of our students and families are most interested in, probably many of the schools that your students and families are also most interested in. Just to give a few really quick data points, the competition now versus 10 years ago, when you look at admit rates, someplace like Florida, the admit rate was 42%, now 24%.
Wow.
NYU was 30%, now 8%. Someplace like Tulane was 27%, now 12%. So you see how this shift in data, and data is a very important factor to pay attention to in this process. You have to understand the stats. So that has been a dramatic shift. There is what they call a cliff, where the population is finally starting to decline. But I suspect, and other experts expect, that that will not really affect these schools that have seen this kind of growth in applications. It will affect enrollment at schools that are struggling. And that's why we're seeing some closures of some of the smaller private schools, frankly. Another big shift has been the reliance on early decision. Early decision is where you apply early, and if you're admitted, it's a commitment. So it's a big deal. And because there's been such uncertainty in the world, first COVID, now the political climate, colleges are really relying on early decision more heavily to fill their class. And so the admit rate in early decision tends to be much higher than that of regular decision. I'll throw in a small school because I still love the smaller schools. Amherst, 29% admit rate in early decision, 8% admit rate in regular decision. So again, at a lot of the top schools, we are seeing a pretty heavy reliance on early decision. Another change that's been in the news a lot, not just in higher ed, is the change in diversity, and how there has been a change in policy that colleges cannot use affirmative action in the admissions process. And so that emphasis on race and ethnicity is no longer possible. That is no longer permissible. And so that has been a big shift in the process that, frankly, when I started in my career, I didn't expect that to happen, right? And then I'd say the most recent change we've seen, like in the last few months, is much greater waitlist activity. Several schools late, like August, took many students, as many as 50 from their waitlist. Duke, Columbia, Stanford, BU. This was in large part because so many international students were not able to get visas and come. So suddenly these schools realized they had a lot of empty seats, and that's a loss of revenue for them, especially with all these budget cuts. And so they opened up their wait list somewhat unexpectedly, much later than we typically see.
Interesting. Wow. And I feel like in some of those you've maybe answered this a little bit, but I'm curious, like, what do you feel has contributed to maybe some of these changes, these shifts? Like, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things, but just from your perspective, what are some things that you maybe have noticed that have kind of made these large swings or these big shifts in this process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that character piece shifted because many of the really top colleges realized just having an entire class of leaders or really smart kids, that is not always a good thing. That can create a very intense environment. And with so many challenges in terms of emotional well-being and wellness, there's been a real emphasis on, let's not just think about who the leaders are, who the smartest kids are, but let's look at what motivates people. What kind of human beings are they? What kind of community members are they? So that, I think, is why we saw that very important and I think valuable shift in how applications were being reviewed.
Right. And I would agree with you. I think it is a huge piece that I'm glad isn't being overlooked, because there are some huge pieces to that. And I'm so glad to see that being a valuable weight in the process. So I'm curious, obviously we've got AI. So this has made a change in all realms of our life, but education is no exception here. So
Yes.
with AI becoming a part of the admissions world, like both in how colleges review applications and then how students are tempted to write with them, like what advice do you have for students and parents on making sure their application feels authentically theirs?
Yeah. I think just like students are hearing in school and from their teachers, there has become more of an acceptance of AI and tools
Mhm.
like ChatGPT. It's not just this bad word, don't ever use it,
Mhm.
don't touch it, it's cheating.
Yeah.
But there's a time and a place for it.
Mhm.
And that is the same in this process.
Yeah.
You um, could use ChatGPT to write your essays, but you are going to have mediocre essays, and it will be
Mhm.
obvious that you did not personalize them and put the time and the effort in.
Mhm.
Most of us who have read thousands upon thousands of essays, either on the admission side or counselors like myself who've been doing this for a
Mhm.
minute, um, we know it's pretty obvious, just like you know if an essay is there's too many cooks in the kitchen, a student's
Mhm.
voice is not coming through. For these essays, voice is so important. That
Mm.
authenticity piece that you mentioned, Danielle,
Yeah.
is so important. So sure, I do think AI can be helpful for brainstorming, generating
Mhm.
ideas. I've seen students use it in appropriate, valuable ways to help them get their resumes organized, but I don't think ultimately it is the right way to go with writing your essays. I do think you will
Mhm.
really be compromising your applications, the quality of your applications, your essays,
Mhm.
and frankly, missing an opportunity to give these colleges a sense of who you really are, what
Yeah.
makes you tick, what's
Mhm.
important to you.
Yeah.
ChatGPT cannot personalize your application and your essays in the way that a student can do themselves.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, I mean, I would say that maybe admissions officers are probably on high alert for AI written essays, and as you said, can probably very easily easily spot
Yes.
them. So, how
Yes.
can students showcase like genuine passion and individuality in this era where you've got admissions officers who are, really on high alert for these types of essays that they're, I'm sure, seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just speaking honestly, writing their own essays is honestly the first step. We have a process where the counselor, someone like myself, is helping guide them on what colleges are looking for, what
Mhm.
topics will help them stand out, what the messaging or purpose should be. And then we have teachers, people who are really experienced in teaching students how to write, help the student execute. So they understand how to help the student do this themselves as
Yeah.
opposed to fall prey to the temptation, to write for them, which is
Mhm.
not the way to go. These
Yeah.
students need to write these essays themselves. And so one thing that we try to help students understand is it is not a trauma Olympics. Not everybody
Mhm.
has faced trauma. That does not need to be an ingredient to make a good
Right.
essay. You do want to show some humility, some vulnerability,
Mhm.
some growth. That's important for any essay or any story. When you think about great books you've read, there's some kind of
Mhm.
conflict or tension. It doesn't have to be something very serious as long as, again, they learn something about you. I can think of an essay that was very funny where a student admitted they don't like hummus, right? Like everybody
Yeah.
likes hummus now. I can think about a great essay several years ago where a student talked about actually stopping playing a sport that had been their whole life, but realizing, well, they were very good at it. And the leader of the team, it was not something they were enjoying as much. And it was taking away valuable time for them to pursue other things that they were more genuinely interested in. So it was a very courageous essay. I think the idea of quitting feels like a failure, but if you talk about it in an honest way and show how this actually opened opportunities, it can be very powerful, and just help a reader connect with you on a very human level. I'm also a big believer in human interaction. I do think there are still ways to get in front of admissions counselors, either when you're visiting a campus or when these admissions counselors are out on the road, either visiting your high school or attending local events in your area. I think making those personal impressions matters. I think keeping up that dialogue, having an email exchange, if appropriate, is a way, again, not just to make chit chat, but it was so nice to meet you. I have a follow-up question, or I really enjoyed learning X, Y, and Z. Another new element that I think speaks to this question is an element called glimpse. Many colleges have begun to subscribe to this program called Glimpse, where you can submit an interview. It's a recording, it's a video recording. So it has really become more popular instead of interviews, where colleges, that's a lot of human power that's required to staff all those interviews. Duke was one of the first schools a few years ago. Now, Vanderbilt, Boston University, several schools love Glimpse, University of Chicago. It's a 60 to 90 second unedited. It's not supposed to be something highly edited or polished. It's just supposed to be, like the word reveals, a glimpse into who you are. So just a chance to have a conversation and be a little bit more casual in your interaction with the school.
I love that. That's awesome. And I'm sure changing some things, but a really different approach. So one thing parents and students often overlook is the choice of major. So do you think that matters in the admissions process? And is there anything new to really consider when applying for a particular major?
Yes, major is a really important one. And I think a topic that many students and families overlook. It is definitely one of those nuances that can really impact the decision. Depending on what major you are applying into, the competition can be very fierce, or it could be an opportunity to really stand out because it could be a major that they're really trying to grow and don't have as much enrollment as they would like. They would like to increase the enrollment in that area. Not every school reads by major, so this does not pertain globally everywhere. You really need to know which schools pay attention to that, which don't. UNC, Tulane don't read by major, but most schools really do pay attention to at least what school within the university. There is different criteria. Certainly Cornell is that way. So it is something to make sure that you investigate for each of your schools. I'd love to share a couple statistics.
Absolutely.
Just to highlight how this can play out. So at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, the business school admit rate is 20.9%. The overall admit rate, 36.6%. Business is very popular at most schools. It is just one of those areas that there's high interest in our society right now. Engineering is another one of those areas. At Berkeley, the overall admit rate is 12%. The admit rate for engineering, 7%.
Wow.
Another one, going back to that interest in wellness, emotional well-being, the mental health crisis we're having in this country, psychology is very, very popular. At Bucknell, you will see they list that as one of the majors that tends to be a bit more competitive compared to the overall. So we're definitely seeing that one as well. One area that can be an advantage that you just tend to see a slightly higher admit rate, there isn't as much interest, is education. University of Michigan just rolled out a first year program in education, which is a new opportunity to begin in education as a first year student.
Wow.
And Vanderbilt has a very renowned school, the Peabody School of Education. And at Vanderbilt, the overall admit rate is 4.7%. And the admit rate to Peabody is 13%. So that's a great example of really an opportunity. Again, I wouldn't say don't apply to these majors that are highly competitive or impacted if they are where your interest is genuine. Right. Just make sure you have the right courses, testing, preparation to really show the strengths in those areas, and perhaps have a broader list of schools if you are applying to these more competitive programs and majors.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. So to kind of go a little bit further on that. So for students who are maybe aiming for, a really competitive major or program, you've mentioned a couple things, but what are some other strategies they can really focus on to try and help move that needle in their direction?
Yeah, I think that for students, for instance, who are really interested in business, but more the human, softer side of business,
Mhm.
the people skills, the
Yeah.
marketing, the HR, many communication schools and majors have a lot of overlap. There's
Hmm.
also different organizational studies,
Mhm.
entrepreneurship programs and majors that are often embedded in the liberal arts schools. So just
Yeah.
looking a little bit more deeply and understanding what's available can
Mhm.
be very, very helpful. I'd say for something like psychology, many students think they're interested in psychology, but might actually be more interested in sociology, which isn't as popular. So just having those conversations early in high school, helping educate students about what these different departments, programs mean, because a lot of this nomenclature is foreign to high school students. Not every high school has an AP psychology class. Rarely do they have a sociology class. So it's helpful just to do that deeper research and really understand what these different majors and programs and options are.
Parents, we know how much you care for your children and their future. That's why we've spent more than a decade perfecting our one-on-one online tutoring services and working to develop amazing tutoring relationships that support students in reaching their full potential. Our mission is to make your life easier by matching your students with expert tutors who will meet them where they are, help them learn to invest in themselves and their education, and guide them toward the perspective that every problem has a solution. What makes us different? Our tutors and our tech. We only hire the best, hand-picked tutors who are experts in their fields and passionate about mentoring students. We bring learning to life with iPads, Apple Pencils, and an interactive whiteboard that makes online tutoring more hands-on and effective than ever before. At Simplify EDU, your student gets more than just a tutor. They get a mentor who understands how they learn best. So whether your child is struggling with the fundamentals of algebra, writing their first essay, prepping for AP exams, or shooting for top scores on the SAT, we're here to help every step of the way. Visit simplifyedu.com today to request a free consultation and mention Educators at Heart to receive 10% off your first month of tutoring. Let's build a brighter future together. So you believe the admissions process can actually be joyful instead of stressful. So can you tell us what does that actually look like? How does that really flesh out in real life?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think this process can be joyful. I find that I have a lot of fun with my students. I think the students feel that when they're getting support and they feel well informed, they're more relaxed. It's not such a scary unknown. I think just like anything else, when you have a roadmap, a plan, you feel more settled and can be more joyful as opposed to just letting the anxiety kind of take over in the process. I would imagine it's similar with test prep. Pretty daunting when you get started, but once
Absolutely.
you feel like you're in good hands, you're like, okay, I've got this. So finding those matches is really critical. We really focus on the match, both the match between the student and the counselor, because we have a team of counselors, making sure
Mhm.
you're with someone you connect with well, who you feel like you can really talk to openly, and someone who really knows and has expertise in the areas that you are interested in terms of
Mhm.
the types of schools, the types of majors.
Yeah.
Um, Secondarily, really looking at those colleges that you're going to thrive in, doing a deep dive. Who are you? What do you value? What's important to you? Not
Mhm.
just what do you want to study, not just I want a big football school, but
Mhm.
how do you learn best? What kind of students do you like to be around? What kind of town do you want to be in?
Mhm.
All of those factors are really a great way to find joy in this process. I also
Mhm.
think visiting colleges can be really fun. I still
Mhm.
love visiting colleges. I
Absolutely.
do it wherever
Yeah.
I go and I still plan trips. I think seeing the opportunity, the
Mhm.
open mindedness on a college campus,
Mhm.
the idealism, it's very inspiring.
Yeah,
And college campuses are very beautiful. I mean, it's
they
really one
are.
of the jewels of our country. So that can be a lot of fun for
Mhm.
students. I do think writing essays can be fun. Often I see it as a process of self exploration. It is often not the type of writing students have done in a while. Very often, those kind of essays about yourself are more what you do in elementary or middle school. So it takes a minute to flex that muscle. But then once we get into it, I find the students do sometimes learn about themselves as well as feel like they become better writers by doing this kind of writing and by really working on it in iterations. And then lastly, I just think it's exciting to pick your next home. Like we all grow up where we grow up. That's not something most of us get much say in. That's our parents' job. But this is a chance for you to say what it is you think you need in your next home. Obviously, parents need to be involved. There's a lot of expense. And so it is a family process and journey. But the fact that students have some say in where they get to go, I think is really exciting.
I totally agree. It's such a unique time that, you know, is just can be overwhelming. But yes, I love that you emphasize like how special it can be, because you can kind of miss that if you let the overwhelm and the scariness take over too much, and like see like this is a really a once in a lifetime opportunity for you that you're just not going to experience something like that probably again. So I love the emphasis on soaking that in and seeing the positive. So you talked a little bit about your process and your team, and I know you've told us that you've built a team that you're really proud of, which is amazing. And so I guess to maybe dig a little bit deeper on that, like what makes a college counselor great, and how do you feel like that translates into better outcomes for students?
Yeah, absolutely. So just like colleges have begun to put more emphasis on character, we have always done the same in our process. So we have a very vigorous interview hiring process. And one of the components that we're looking at really closely is not just experience, but also character, because these are counselors who are going to be working very closely with young people who might be working with them for 3 years, starting in late ninth, early 10th grade, who are going to be sitting on a Zoom in these students and these families' kitchens and living rooms and, you know, kind of become an extension of the family. So we need to know that these counselors really care, are invested, are committed to the process and to these students and families. So we have multiple rounds of interviews. We have a written component where we're really digging in and getting to know, like, who is this person, right? What is their self-awareness? We also have a very high bar for counselors' experience. We are highly unusual in that we only hire counselors who have worked for a minimum of 10 years on the high school side. So we are not hiring people fresh out of admissions. We're not hiring people who are fresh out of teaching or test prep for that matter, because those are some of the fields people often transition to college counseling. They have to be career professionals who have really learned the ropes by doing this work in a high school, and not just any high school. It has to be a high school that has a designated college counseling department, which not every high school has. Some high schools are very large, and the guidance counselors wear many, many hats and are serving all 4 grades and barely get to do real college counseling. So we are really hiring people who have the experience and the professionalism over the pedigree. Like just having worked in admissions for 10 seconds at Princeton does not qualify you to be a college counselor, in our opinion. Many of our counselors have said that they felt like they were at their best when they came to premium prep. One counselor in particular had been at a private school, an elite private school in her community for over 30 years, and said the hive mind, this community of 20 counselors sharing information, working together behind the scenes with the students, the oversight. She said she was never a better counselor than when she worked with us. She has since retired. But I think that speaks to the quality of our counselors and the support they even get once they are here at premium prep.
Yeah, that's incredible. That really is, and does speak volumes to what you guys do and just the culture you've built there. So that's amazing. Could you maybe? We love giving just some practical advice for our listeners, for our parents. So could you maybe give parents like a short checklist for helping their students just stand out in the admissions process? What's kind of just a couple quick little takeaways that they could snag from this time here?
Yeah, absolutely. So being organized is important. I think parents can help with timeline and organization, especially for those students who are still learning those executive functioning skills. We
Hmm.
put a lot of timelines and worksheets in place, but we are not at home seeing what the student is doing. So I
Yeah.
think parents can help with that piece. I think it's also really helpful for parents to give their students some space and kind of read the room. Their children are trying to show them that they are ready to launch.
Hmm.
And if they feel their parents don't trust them and are second guessing, it can create a lot of tension. So I think one of the values of having professional test prep companies, tutoring
Hmm.
companies, and certainly in my case, college counselors, is that we're allowing you to be the parent and maintain that
Yeah.
relationship and turning over the nuts and bolts of the process to the experts. And so
Hmm.
you can step away and not have to feel as involved and can just
Hmm.
be the one who is providing comfort, support,
Hmm.
validation of how proud you are of them.
Yeah.
I think something else that parents can be very helpful with is the brag sheet. That is something for the counselor,
Mm.
particularly if the counselors are working with a large caseload and it's very difficult for them to get to know each and every student. The
Yeah.
parents can provide a lot of helpful information to the counselor so
Hmm.
that they can write the strongest letter of recommendation possible. Because most colleges do require letters from counselors, and not all
Right.
high schools have the ability to work
Mhm.
very closely. The counselors don't all know the students as well as would be ideal. I'd say attention to detail is really important as well. Just making sure you're paying attention and helping the student with like all the requirements or recommendations. I mentioned the glimpse videos as an
Mhm.
example. Some schools have a self reported transcript that's called STARS, some don't. So just
Yeah.
having all that organization
Mhm.
in place. Another area that parents can be helpful with is planning visits, whether in person
Mhm.
or virtual. Many colleges track interest, which means they're paying attention to how and to what
Mhm.
extent students are engaging with
Oh,
their
okay.
college. Are they opening the emails that the college
Mhm.
is sending? Are they making time to visit? Are they meeting with the admissions counselors when they're visiting their local community? And so
Mhm.
making sure that the student is engaging in an authentic way with those schools that are paying attention to that can be
Right.
very important. And especially since travel often involves calendaring,
Mhm.
family planning, budget, that is another area that I often find parents can be very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's huge. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Alyse. I know this has been so helpful, so beneficial. I think our families are really going to find just a lot of clarity in what can be really an overwhelming process, but clearly very rewarding. So before we kind of move on to our last little question here, I'd love for you just to share how our audience can find you. I want you to share a little bit about Premium Prep and how if this is an area where they are kind of moving into and need some
Sure.
guidance, like how can they seek you out and utilize some of your services?
Yeah, so we offer a range of different packages and programs depending on where the student and the family is in the process. So,
Mhm.
from very comprehensive to more short term, let's get this application or this
Mhm.
essay done. So, families can reach out to us wherever they are in the journey. We can
Okay.
be reached on our website, which is premiumprep.com. You can also call us on our 1-800 number, one eight
Okay.
hundred 560 8760. And you are all welcome to email me directly if you have questions or want to learn more. So my email is A Levine, which is my last name, at premiumprep.com. And thank you, Danielle. This has been really fun and I appreciate this opportunity and we love partnering with you guys.
Absolutely. And everyone, I'm going to have those resources from Alyse and how to reach her directly in the show notes. So you guys can find that really easily and be able to reach out if you want to benefit from just such great service and help in this area. So before I let you go, we love to ask all of our guests, we call them our simplified lessons. So if you had to simplify just maybe one or two of the most important lessons that you've had to learn as a student of life, that
Yes.
you wouldn't mind sharing for our audience, what would that be?
Absolutely. I was definitely an anxious student, kind of that
Mm.
overachiever type. So I relate to a lot of our students.
Yeah.
But I've learned that smiling even when I'm stressed, really helps. I notice when I'm with my students in a Zoom and they seem really stressed, if I smile, it helps them relax. I noticed when I'm on the tennis court, I play tennis, and I'm really frustrated with how I'm playing. If I smile, I play better. I think I also aggravate my opponent, but I just think smiling, the endorphins, the way it changes your mood and those around you, is very powerful. So it's so simple, it costs nothing, and it can really change how you feel and how others feel.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. I think that's excellent. Well, again, thank you so much, Alyse. This has been a pleasure. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, Danielle. It's been a lot of fun. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to our show for future episodes. See you next time.